Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the dust and heat of a Roman battlefield. But not as a mighty general, or even as a lowly legionnaire, no. Tonight you're the unlucky soul who's been dragged into slavery, bound in ropes, stumbling. As soldiers shove you forward, you've been captured, torn from whatever life you once knew. And the Romans aren't exactly handing out free spa vouchers. The chains bite into your wrists, your throat is dry, and every time you think you might rest, the butt of a spear drives you on again. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, we'll get cozy in your misery together. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stumble along the rough road that leads toward Rome, the eternal city. But for you, it feels like the eternal nightmare. Soldiers drag a chain of captives, a parade of misery that includes men, women, and children. Some are Gauls with wild blonde hair, others Greeks with sharp accents. And you could be anyone unlucky enough to be on the losing side of Roman conquest. The empire spreads its arms like an iron octopus, and if your village happens to be in its path, well, congratulations, you're free real estate. The air smells of sweat, leather, and the faint metallic tang of fear, if that could have a scent. Every time you look at the guards, you see the polished helmets gleaming in the sun, reflecting how hopeless your situation is. These are professionals, men who've marched information across continents. You, meanwhile, are barefoot, stumbling, and quite possibly sunburned. Historically, Rome took slaves from every corner of its empire. By some estimates, slaves made up nearly a third of the city's population. That's a lot of people who didn't exactly sign up for Roman life. And you're one of them now, pressed into the human tide that keeps Rome's economy and entertainment running. Scholars still argue whether being a gladiator was better than being a household servant, since at least you could win glory, but honestly, when both paths involve being owned, it's a bit like debating whether you'd rather drown in wine or in vinegar. Your captors don't bother explaining where you're going. You hear muttered Latin words you barely understand. Service, Venalicius slave dealer. It doesn't take long to figure out your immediate future. You're going to be sold like livestock. You see the wagon wheels cutting deep ruts into the road, and every jolt of the journey reminds you that your body is no longer yours. There's a quirky tidbit here. Romans sometimes marched prisoners in chains through the city streets as part of triumphal parades. Imagine it. The victorious general rides in on a chariot, golden crown on his head, while you shuffle behind, shackled, dusty, and most likely wishing you could vanish into the cobblestones. For the crowd, it's entertainment. For you, it's the first humiliating taste of what being Roman property means. The city itself looms on the horizon like a mirage. You catch your first glimpse of the walls of Rome, the aqueducts arching gracefully across the skyline, and the endless sprawl of tiled roofs. If it weren't for the chains, you might think it's beautiful. Instead, it's terrifying. Rome is the beating heart of an empire, and here, people like you disappear into its veins like drops of water into the Tiber River. Your fellow captives whisper about what happens next. Some say you'll be bought by a wealthy senator to scrub his floors. Others claim the military might throw you into the mines, where men die coughing in darkness. And then someone says the word Gladiator and a chill passes down the chain. You don't know much, but you've heard enough. Men fighting to the death in front of roaring crowds. Could that really be your future? The soldiers laugh as one of your companions collapses from exhaustion. They drag him upright by his hair, not even breaking stride. You realize that your fate isn't just sealed, it's being dragged forward whether you resist or not. Your old life is behind you, and ahead lies only Rome. And here's the kicker. The Romans loved categorizing people. To them, you're no longer a person, your property, a statistic, a future source of amusement or profit. The empire thrives on this system of human chattel. and you've been plugged right into it like a cog in their endless machine. Historians still debate whether captives like you were randomly assigned to gladiator schools, or whether certain traits, height, build, sheer stubbornness made you a prime candidate. Either way, congratulations! You're about to find out. Thus hand dot as the gates of the city creak open and you shuffle inside. The noise of Rome swallows you whole. Merchants cry out from stalls, the stench of fish mingles with roasted meat. Children dart through alleys, and in the center of it all, you are captured soul, dragged into the largest marketplace of human misery the ancient world has ever known. Your chains clink with every step, each metallic rattle reminding you that from now on, your horrible life as a Roman gladiator is just beginning. You don't get much time to marvel at Rome before you're shoved into the human cattle pen. That is the slave market. The place reeks of dust, sweat, and desperation. You're herded onto a raised platform, standing under the open sky, and for the first time you truly understand you're not a person here, you're merchandise. Roman traders walk past with scrolls and wax tablets, checking off boxes like they're browsing an ancient version of Amazon. Only, instead of free shipping, you come with bruises, blisters, and a broken spirit. The auctioneer, wearing a toga little too clean to be trusted, waves his hand toward you. Strong back, good legs, he shouts in Latin. A guard yanks at your arms, forcing you to flex. Buyers crowd closer. One of them actually pokes your bicep, like testing a melon at the market. Another grabs your jaw, tilting your head side to side to inspect your teeth. Your stomach knots. This isn't an audition for Rome's next top model. This is someone literally deciding your value in silver coins. Historically, Rome had entire districts dedicated to selling human beings, often near the Forum. Slaves were displayed with placards around their necks listing their origin, skills, and defects. If you limped, the sign told everyone. If you couldn't speak Latin, that was noted too. Scholars still argue whether certain premium categories like trained scribes or skilled cooks were treated with a sliver more dignity. But for the poor souls destined for the arena, the selling block was just the appetizer before the main course of violence. The crowd buzzes with excitement. Some buyers want cheap household help, others burly men for their farms. But you catch sight of a certain kind of customer, the lanista, a gladiator trainer. He wears a hardened expression, scanning for muscle, stamina, and maybe a hint of defiance. You try to keep your face blank, but it's hard when you realize your fate could be sealed by one nod from him. A quirky tidbit: ancient sources tell us that some buyers rubbed oil on potential purchasers to make their muscles shine brighter under the sun. Yes, you might actually get oiled up like a prize pig at a fair. The Romans had a flair for spectacle even in the marketplace. And if you think this is degrading, don't worry, it only gets worse. Bids start flying. You hear numbers shouted in sestertii, each one like a nail in the coffin of your freedom. The auctioneer laughs and hypes you up, slapping your shoulder, as if you're a fine horse. The lanista raises his hand casually. Another man tries to outbid him, but the trainer's glare cuts the challenge short. The hammer well. A wooden stick comes down. Sold. You're shoved off the platform into a holding pen, branded with a chalk mark to indicate your buyer. Your heart sinks. You've just been purchased for blood sport. Out of all the miserable fates on sale that day, kitchen drudge, field laborer. Minor, you've landed in the most infamous profession Rome has to offer. And here's the historical fact that stings. Gladiator trainers sometimes paid high prices for recruits, because a good fighter could earn them fortunes. To the lanista, you're not a person, you're an investment. That's both slightly flattering and utterly terrifying. Historians still argue whether lanistae treated their fighters with a shred of care, like prized racehorses, or whether cruelty was the standard operating procedure. Either way, you'll soon find out. You wait in the pen, surrounded by other new recruits. A man beside you whispers he's a Thracian, captured in a border skirmish. Another claims he was once a free citizen, condemned for debt. You all share the same wide-eyed look of dread. Some might even be praying to their gods Greek, Egyptian, Celtic. It doesn't matter. In this moment, every deity is receiving collect calls from desperate men, The Lanista's assistants arrive, armed with sticks and whips. They herd you like livestock down the street through the crush of Rome. The city's people barely glance at you. To them, you're just another batch of fresh gladiators destined for their amusement. They cheer, jeer, and sometimes toss fruit ripe or rotten depending on their mood. You can't decide what's worse, their indifference or their enthusiasm dotters. The sun beats down, sweat stings your eyes. You're no longer you. You're now merchandise owned by the Ludus the Gladiator School. The weight of that realization presses harder than the chains on your wrists. You shuffle onward, each step dragging you closer to a life where survival is a performance, and death is entertainment. And somewhere, deep in the pit of your stomach, a voice whispers that your horrible life as a Roman gladiator has only just been purchased soon. It will be lived. The sun has barely risen when you're led into a courtyard surrounded by stone walls. You smell burning coals and feel the heat before you see the saucer brazier glowing. With a piece of iron resting inside it, your stomach drops. You know what's coming. The Lanista's men line you and the other new purchases up, stripping you down to nothing but the shame that clings to your skin. One by one, they press the glowing metal into flesh. The hiss of scorched skin is followed by screams, and soon the smell of burnt meat hangs in the air. Then it's your turn. Two men grab your arms and hold you steady. You thrash, but there's no escape. The iron touches your shoulder and fire rips through your nerves. You can almost hear your own soul shrieking. You bite your lip until it bleeds, but the mark stays a permanent reminder that you belong to someone else. This wasn't some theatrical invention. Romans really did brand slaves, often on the forehead, though gladiator recruits were usually marked on the shoulder or thigh. The brand made escape almost impossible, even if you fled. Anyone could see the mark and know you were stolen property. Historians still argue whether all gladiators were branded or only the lowest ranked, but the fact remains you now carry your owner's insignia burned into your body like cattle. One of the trainers grins, holding up the iron for the next. Poor soul! He makes a joke in Latin about how at least you won't forget where you belong now. The others laugh. You don't. Your shoulder throbs, the wound raw and stinging with every breath. You'll be nursing this scar for weeks and yet in Rome's. Logic. You're lucky. Some slaves branded for punishment bore the word *FUG** fugitive * across their forehead. S forever marked as runners. You at least just got a symbol, a logo, if you will. Though it's less Nike swoosh and more congratulations, your disposable merchandise. The pain isn't just physical, it's psychological. Every time you catch sight of the mark, you're reminded that you're no longer your own. It's hard to sleep knowing that even your skin has been edited to suit someone else's story. You think back to your old life, whatever it was, family, freedom, familiar voices, and realize it's gone. You've been overwritten. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gladiators later turned that ugly scar into a twisted badge of pride. Surviving long enough to gain fame, they flaunted the brand as proof they'd endured. Imagine someone saying, "Oh, this old burn, just proof I survived the Ludus." Dark humor at its finest. You don't feel that way now. Right now, you'd trade anything to scrub the scar off your body. Once branded, you're shoved toward a bucket of sour wine mixed with herbs. A medicus, Rome's version of a doctor, splashes the liquid on your wound. It stings worse than the burn itself. He mutters something about infection, but you can tell his concern isn't for you, it's for the investment you represent. Your property. Broken property is less profitable. The Lanista himself appears, tall and imposing, with the look of someone who measures human worth in denarii and scars. He surveys the branded line of new gladiators and nods in approval. To him, you're now officially his, a tool for profit, a pawn for spectacle, a body to be thrown into sand for the crowd's delight. Historians still debate whether some gladiators volunteered for this life-free men. Who sold themselves for fame or money? The records suggest it happened, but standing here, shoulder burning, chains rattling, you can't imagine why anyone would ever choose this. It feels less like a career option and more like a nightmare you can't wake up from. As you're herded toward the barracks, You glance down at the fresh brand, skin still smoking faintly. You realize this mark will outlast you, even if you survive the Ludus. Even if by some miracle you win freedom, the scar will remain. Rome has taken your body and stamped it like parchment. You walk on, shoulder aching, soul heavy. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator has now been signed, sealed, and branded. The gates slam behind you with a weighty thud that makes your stomach churn. You've entered the Ludus the Gladiator School from the outside. It might look like just another walled compound in the city, but inside it feels like a prison, designed for a very special kind of misery. The air smells of dust, sweat, and iron, with a faint undertone of cooked barley drifting from the kitchens. You're shoved forward into the central courtyard, where other gladiators are already at work. And instantly you understand, this isn't training, it's conditioning. Rows of men march in circles under the blazing sun, each carrying wooden swords that look harmless until you notice the welts across their bodies. These practice weapons are deliberately twice as heavy as real ones, so that when the time comes to fight in the arena, the real steel will feel almost light. Trainers bark orders in Latin, their whips cracking to punctuate every sluggish move. You can't understand all the words, but you definitely understand the tone obedience or pain. Historically, the largest gladiator school in Rome was the Ludus Magnus built right next to the Colosseum and connected to it by underground tunnels. Imagine that, you're training in the shadow of the very arena where you might die, and at any moment they can march you straight from the barracks to the sand. Without the mercy of daylight, scholars still argue whether smaller Ludi offered slightly more humane conditions or whether they were all just cleverly disguised labor camps. Either way, here in your school, it feels bleak. You're led through the corridors and into the sleeping quarters. It's not a dormitory, it's a cell. Wooden bunks line the walls, chains hang from the corners, and the door bolts shut from the outside. You run your fingers along the rough wall and realize you'll be spending many nights staring at it. If you had dreams before, this place is designed to crush them flat. And yet, there's an order to the misery. The Lunista and his trainers treat the place like a factory, producing fighters the way a baker produces loaves of bread. New recruits like you are sorted, inspected, and tossed into the system. If you're strong, you'll be molded into a heavy-armed SECUTO or If you're quick, you might be trained as a nimble or ETIAR, a US with net and trident. You don't get to choose. The school chooses for you, based on what makes for the most entertaining show. There's a quirky detail here. Some gladiators were even forced to take on personas. That mocked conquered peoples, Thracians for instance, fought with curved swords. Because it reminded Romans of their exotic enemies, it's a cruel joke you get conquered, enslaved, and then made to reenact your people's humiliation for sport. Rome really knew how to twist the knife, metaphorically and literally. As you're marched across the yard, you see gladiators sparring in pairs, sweat dripping off their bodies, sand sticking to their legs. Some look half dead already, their movements sluggish from exhaustion. Others move with terrifying precision, every thrust and dodge drilled into muscle memory. You realize these men are both your rivals and your only possible allies. If you fight them poorly, you'll be punished. If you fight them too well, you might kill the only person who might share bread with you later. It's a razor's edge balance, and you've only just stepped onto it. The trainers watch everything. One cracks his whip when a recruit lowers his guard. Another shouts when a thrust is sloppy. They circle like vultures, eager to punish weakness. You instinctively straighten your posture, trying not to draw attention. But you know it's only a matter of time before the lash finds your back to at meal time. You're given a bowl of steaming barley porridge. It's thick, bland, and sticks to your ribs. You choke it down because hunger leaves no room for pride. The older gladiators laugh at the grimace on your face. Get used to it, one mutters. That's your new delicacy. You realize this food isn't meant to please, it's meant to bulk you up, fuel for muscle. Like slop thrown to pig stop when night falls, the cell doors clang shut. You lie on the hard bunk, shoulder aching from the brand, stomach churning from the porridge, ears ringing with the sound of chains. You stare into the darkness, listening to the restless breathing of men around you. Some mutter prayers, some cry quietly, hoping no one notices. You close your eyes and imagine your old life, but it feels like a dream fading into smoke. Historians still debate whether gladiator schools offered a chance at camaraderie, a strange brotherhood forged in shared suffering, or whether fear and rivalry poisoned every bond. Right now, all you know is that you're trapped in a machine that chews men up and spits them into the arena. And tomorrow, when the trainers come calling, you'll step into the yard again, carrying a heavy wooden sword, wondering just how long this horrible new life will last. The first dawn in the asterisk LUDUS asterisk hits you like a slap. There's no gentle rooster crow, no lazy morning stretch. The iron doors creak open, and the clang of whips on the stone floor jolts everyone awake. You're marched into the yard before you. Can even rub the sleep from your eyes. The trainers shout, their voices sharp enough to slice through the morning haze, and wooden practice swords are thrust into your hands. It feels heavier than you expected. Much heavier. The trainers did that. On purpose. Roman gladiator schools were infamous for using asterisk blunt wooden training swords twice the weight of actual steel weapons. The logic was simple. If you could swing this clumsy log of wood until your arms ached, a real sword would feel like a feather later. Right now, though, your shoulders burn, your palms blister, and the sword feels more like a punishment than a tool. You're lined up with the other recruits. The drill begins, forward thrust, step back. Shield up, forward thrust, step back, shield up, over and over. The rhythm hammered into your bones until you stop thinking and just obey. The overseer walks the line, whip in hand, smacking anyone who falters. When you miss a step, you feel the lash across your back, hot and stinging. You grit your teeth. This isn't training, it's survival conditioning. Historically, these drills weren't about making you elegant, they were about making you automatic. Roman audiences demanded precision, and a sloppy gladiator wasn't just boring, he was dead. Scholars still argue whether gladiators were trained to fight realistically, or more like choreographed performers, but either way, the grueling repetition made sure you wouldn't embarrass your lonista in front of a paying crowd. Hours pass, sweat pouring down your body, your tunic clings to your skin, and the sand beneath your feet turns into muddy clumps where your sweat drips. Your arms feel like lead, your breath comes in ragged gasps, and still the trainer shouts for more. You steal a glance at the others, some collapse, only to be dragged up by their hair. Others push through with grim determination. You wonder which category you'll fall into. Then comes the sparring. You're paired with another recruit, both of you clutching heavy wooden swords. The trainer shouts for you to fight, and the man lunges clumsily. You block, stumble, and nearly fall. Over. The whip cracks against your ankle, not for losing, but for failing to make it look good. That's the real lesson in Rome. Fighting is theater. You're not just killing, you're performing. There's a quirky detail here. Some gladiator schools had wooden dummies set up in the yard, nicknamed post boys. You'd hack at them for hours, practicing strikes until your arms felt like they were going to fall off. Think of it like the ancient Roman version of a punching bag, except instead of getting stronger for fitness, you're just preparing to be someone else's entertainment. By midday, the sun is brutal, baking the yard. Your throat feels like sandpaper, but water is rationed sparingly. When you finally gulp down a ladle of it, it's warm and tastes faintly of iron. You don't care. You drink greedily, spilling some down your chest. A veteran nearby smirks. Better get used to thirst, rookie. You'll sweat out more than you ever get back. And so the cycle continues. Drill, spar, drill. Collapse, repeat. By the time the sun sinks, you can barely lift your arms. Your whole body hums with exhaustion, every muscle screaming. You drag yourself back to the barracks, collapse onto the hard bunk, and let out a groan you didn't know you were holding in. Sleep comes quickly, but it isn't restful. You dream of endless sand, faceless crowds, and the whip cracking forever behind you. Historians still debate whether some recruits found a grim pride in these drills, an identity forged in sweat and scars, or whether most lived in constant dread, waiting for the day they'd finally be shoved into the arena. You don't have to debate, you feel it in your bones. The training isn't just breaking down your body, it's reshaping your soul into something Rome can sell. As you drift into uneasy sleep, one thought echoes through your head: this isn't training for glory, it's rehearsal for death. By now, you've learned that the LUDUS* doesn't feed you like a person, it fuels you like livestock. When the clanging bell calls you to eat, you shuffle into a cramped hall where benches line. Long wooden tables, bowls are already waiting, filled with a thick, greyish mash that smells faintly of earth and sour wine. You sit, stare at the sludge, and realize this is your diet of beans and barley. The Romans called it the Gladiator diet *, and it was heavy on barley, beans, oatmeal, and ash water. Yes, ash water, literally charred plant ash mixed into your drink for extra calcium. Sounds delicious, right? Don't worry. Your taste buds will stop complaining after a few weeks of despair. Modern historians even gave gladiators a nickname, the *, or barley men. That's right, you're now defined by a cereal grain. You scoop a mouthful into your mouth. It's thick, bland, and pasty, sticking to your teeth like clay. Across the table, another recruit chokes it down with a grimace. Better than starving, he mutters, though his eyes say he doesn't believe it either. The veterans, however, don't complain. They eat quickly, mechanically, shoveling in the barley as if it's gold. Hunger teaches speed, and they know that food left too long might mysteriously vanish into someone else's bowl. Here's a quirky tidbit: some gladiators actually got plump. Yep. Contrary to Hollywood ABS, archaeologists studying gladiator bones found that fighters carried more body fat than lean muscle. Why? Because a bit of fat cushioned wounds and slowed bleeding in the arena. In other words, the lonista didn't want you shredded, he wanted you padded. Like a very anxious sausage about to be grilled. The daily meals don't change much. Morning, barley mash. Evening, beans with maybe a scrap of cabbage. On rare days, you might get a hint of cheese or meat. Usually whatever scraps the trainers decided weren't good enough for their dogs. A jug of sour wine is passed around to cut the taste and dull the misery. You drink, because why not? If the arena doesn't kill you, indigestion probably will. And yet, the diet works in its cruel way. After a few weeks, your arms thicken, your stomach hardens, and your body feels sturdier. You're still tired all the time, but beneath the exhaustion, you sense a grim transformation. You're becoming what they want you to be. A body built for impact, not for choice. Historians still argue whether this high-carb, low-protein diet was intentional strategy or just the cheapest way to feed a horde of slaves. Was the fattening effect a happy accident or part of the plan? You don't care. All you know is that every bite makes you feel less like a person, and more like a beast being fattened for slaughter. The eating hall is noisy. Men laugh, argue, and slam bowls down. Sometimes fights break out over spilled portions. The guards step in quickly, beating everyone involved until the room goes silent again. You learn fast, never waste food, never linger, and never let anyone catch you glancing at their portion too long. Hunger makes even friends dangerous. As the evening meal ends, you wipe the porridge from your beard with the back of your hand. The taste lingers, earthy and bland like soil mixed with sweat. You think of feasts you once knew: bread fresh from an oven, sweet honey on figs, roasted lamb. Now it's all a memory fading like mist. When you rise from the bench, your stomach heavy, you realize that Rome's cruel genius isn't just in its whips or swords, it's in this diet. This carefully measured fuel that keeps you alive just long enough to make sure your death is worth the ticket price. And so you trudge back to your cell, belly full but heart hollow. Another step deeper into your horrible life as a Roman gladiator. Night falls again, and with it comes one of the cruelest routines of the *Gladius*. You're locked in chains before bed. The guards rattle down the hallways, iron keys clinking as they secure each door. You climb into your bunk, wooden boards, creaking beneath your weight, and then comes the sound. Asterisk clank, clank, clank. Asterisk, a heavy chain is fastened around your ankle, the metal cold against raw skin. No matter how tired you are, the bite of iron makes sure you don't forget your property. The room smells of sweat, mold, and bodies packed too close together. Dozens of men snore, cough, or mutter in their sleep, their chains clinking whenever they shift. Some whisper prayers in languages you don't recognize, others lie silent, staring into the dark. You roll onto your side, but the weight of the chain tugs at your ankle, reminding you with every movement that escape isn't just unlikely, it's impossible. Historically, gladiators were locked in barracks at night, often chained to their beds. Security wasn't taken lightly. Lanastay invested a fortune in training slaves, and a runaway was a financial disaster. Scholars still argue whether all recruits were chained every night, or just the newest but your fresh meat so you get. The iron treatment without question. The chain isn't just physical, it's psychological. You feel it pressing into your thoughts as much as your skin. Freedom becomes an abstract concept, something you can imagine but never touch. The irony? The Roman crowd will later cheer you for your supposed bravery and independence in the arena, even as you spend your nights shackled like a dog. You try to find a comfortable position, but comfort is as rare here as a day off. The bunk is rough wood, the blanket a scratchy piece of cloth that smells faintly of mildew. You turn one way, the chain digs in. Turn the other, the man above you groans and shifts, his own chain rattling in chorus with yours. It's like being trapped inside a music box of misery, the melody made entirely of iron clinks and human sighs. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Roman graffiti found near gladiator schools suggests that people actually bet on which fighters would sneak away or attempt escape. Imagine that your desperation reduced to a side bet, like horse race gambling but with runaway humans, and if you did manage to flee, the brand on your skin would give you away. You'd be dragged back, beaten, and possibly executed in public. As a lesson, suddenly, the chain feels almost merciful by comparison. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your body is exhausted from drills, but your mind won't stop racing. You picture the arenas you've heard whispers about, the Colosseum, the amphitheaters in Pompeii and Capua. You see yourself stepping onto the sand, the roar of thousands washing over you. You wonder if you'll last a minute, an hour, or maybe, just maybe, long enough to taste freedom someday. The uncertainty gnaws at you worse than hunger. Every so often, a guard makes his rounds, torchlight flickering through the barred window of your cell. He peers in, counting heads, making sure no one has worked their way loose. You close your eyes and feign sleep, but the clink of his keys keeps you awake. Historians still debate whether some gladiators accepted these nightly chains as routine, or whether the constant restraint drove men mad. You lean toward madness. It's hard to keep your thoughts straight when your very dreams are shackled. You imagine walking outside, seeing the stars without bars in the way, lying down on grass instead of a creaking plank. Then the tug of the chain brings you back. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You drift into uneasy sleep, haunted by the sound of chains that even your dreams can't silence. And when morning comes, the guards will return, unlocking you not for freedom, but for another day of sweat, drills, and the endless rehearsal for death. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just fought in the arena, it's lived here. Every night, shackled in the darkness. When morning drills end and the dust settles, you finally get a chance to size up the men around you. Fellow prisoners, fellow fighters, fellow survivors, at least for now. The barracks are crowded with a jumble of accents and faces, men stolen from every corner of Rome's vast empire. You see Gauls with wild hair and thick arms, Greeks muttering philosophy between mouthfuls of barley, North Africans with eyes that gleam like flint, and Thracians who clutch their curved swords with an almost religious devotion. You quickly realize that these men are both your comrades and your rivals. The irony isn't lost on you. You'll train together, bleed together, maybe even share a joke or a scrap of bread. But sooner or later, you'll be ordered to face each other with real blades. Friendship here comes with an expiration date. One of the older gladiators notices your nervous glances. He's a grizzled veteran with scars running across his chest. Like faded tattoos, don't bother memorizing names, he says flatly. Half of them won't live long enough for you to care. You force a smile, unsure if he's joking, but his eyes are dead serious. Historically, gladiator schools did forge strange bonds. Men lived and trained shoulder to shoulder, and sometimes a sense of brotherhood grew like soldiers in a legion. Yet the arena demanded betrayal sooner or later. Historians still argue whether gladiators felt more loyalty to each other or to their survival instinct from where you're sitting. It feels like both friendship by day, enemies by order. During breaks, you hear fragments of their stories. One man was a farmer condemned for unpaid taxes. Another was a soldier who deserted his post. A few, shockingly, claimed they volunteered for this life, lured by the promise of fame or the hope of winning enough prize money to buy freedom. You can't decide if they're brave, foolish, or simply desperate. And then there are the quiet ones. They sit in corners, eyes distant, saying little. Those men unsettle you the most. You wonder if they've already accepted their fate or if they're plotting some kind of escape. You think back to the Spartacus whispers you heard on the auction block, and a shiver runs through you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Roman women often swooned over gladiators, calling them heroes of the sand. Some even carved love notes into amphitheater walls, like ancient fangirls leaving graffiti at a concert. Say Lodus the Thracian makes the girls sigh. One inscription reads, "You glance down at your sweaty, scarred companions and can't help but chuckle. Who knew misery could be marketed as sexy?" But the glamour doesn't reach the barracks. In here, the air is thick with mistrust. You share food, but you guard your bowl. You share stories, but not secrets. At night, when the chains clink and the guards patrol, you sometimes whisper with the man on the bunk beside you. He's a Celt, broad-shouldered and bitter. "If I die," he says, "one night. Make it quick. Don't give the crowd too much." Fun. You nod, realizing that this is the closest thing to a pact you'll ever make in this place. Historians still argue whether men like you found strength in these fragile bonds, or whether the constant threat of betrayal poisoned every connection. What you know is that every time you look around the yard, you see both potential friends and future corpses. It's a sobering thought, one that sticks with you even as you heft your heavy wooden sword for the next round of drills. So you keep your guard up, both in sparring and in conversation. You learn to laugh at crude jokes, to nod at stories you've heard 3 times already, and to never, ever reveal how afraid you really are. Because here in the *Gladys*, trust is as rare as meat in your porridge, and just as quickly devoured. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't a solitary nightmare. It's one you share with men who might cheer your victory one day and drive a blade into your chest the next. Your first real glimpse of the weapons rack changes everything. Until now, you've been stuck swinging clumsy wooden swords. But today the trainers usher you into a shadowed corridor lined with racks of gleaming steel. Blades catch the morning light, helmets glimmer with brass fittings, and the smell of oiled leather and iron floods your nose. The trainers bark for silence. This isn't a toy shop. This is the factory floor of death. One by one, they march you past the racks, a grizzled instructor explains the choice is not to you, but at you, as though your livestock being fitted for harnesses. He lifts a gladius, short and stabbing, and places it in one man's hand. To another, he straps a curved Thracian sword called *Seeker*, perfect for hooking behind shields. Then he thrusts a heavy rectangular shield into a recruit's arms, nearly knocking him over. The men grunt, sweat already dripping before the fighting even begins. Then comes your turn. The trainer eyes your build, mutters something about your shoulders, and hands you a broad-bladed gladius and a battered wooden shield. You'll fight as *Secutor*. He growls. You nod, though the word means little to you yet. Later, you'll learn it marks you as the traditional enemy of the nimble *Gritarius*. The gladiator armed with net and trident. That's right, Rome doesn't just throw random men into the arena. They choreograph roles, pairing archetypes like characters in a deadly play. Historically, gladiators were trained in distinct classes: the asterisk Murmillo asterisk with his fish-crested helmet and heavy shield, the asterisk Grittierius asterisk, agile and lightly armored, casting. Let's like a fisherman, the asterisk Secutor asterisk, built to chase and corner, and many more. Scholars still argue how standardized these categories were across different asterisk Ludi asterisk, but the evidence is clear. Each fighter was both a weapon and a role, a living chess piece for the crowd's amusement. You test the weight of your new blade. It's shorter than you expected, more for stabbing than slashing. The shield is heavy, pressing against your arm until your muscles ache. You can already feel the sweat pooling at the base of your neck. Across the yard, another recruit is fitted, with the net and trident. He smirks at you, already anticipating the moment when he'll try to snare you like a fish. You glare back, realizing that even your assigned weapon comes with a built-in rivalry. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gladiators had to wear helmets so massive they could barely see out of them. The eye holes were small, the crests ridiculously ornate. Imagine trying to survive combat while looking through a metal peephole. Talk about fighting blind. Worse still, the helmet trapped heat, making every movement feel like you were sparring inside a cooking pot. Rome really knew how to combine danger with discomfort. The trainers force you into formation. Raise the shield. Hold the line, step, thrust, withdraw. Over and over you mimic the motions, your body adjusting to the strange balance of sword and shield. The weight bruises your arm, the helmet fogs your vision, and the sweat runs freely. You wonder how anyone could fight for more than a few minutes in this armor. Then you remember that's the point. Rome isn't interested in endurance marathons. They want short, brutal, dramatic bursts of violence. As the session wears on, you notice the veterans watching from the sidelines. They size you up, whispering among themselves, maybe placing mental bets on how long you'll last. One laughs. When you stumble under the shield's weight, another shakes his head, muttering that you'll be sand meat before the year is out. You try to ignore them, but their words settle deep, heavy as the iron on your arm. Historians still argue whether gladiators trained for victory or simply for spectacle. Did the Lanista hope you'd become skilled enough to win and draw crowds back, or were you just another expendable body in the endless cycle of combat? From the way the trainers sneer, you suspect the answer is both. You're valuable enough to train, but disposable enough to die by the time training ends. Your hands are raw, your shoulders bruised, and your arms trembling from the shield's weight. You collapse onto a bench, sword clattering at your side, staring at the weapon that now defines you. It's no longer just a piece of steel, it's your identity, your future, and quite possibly your grave marker. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator now has a weapon, and that weapon has a role to play in Rome's bloody theatre. The first time you meet the asterisk medicus asterisk, you almost wish you hadn't. He's the resident doctor of the asterisk Ludus asterisk, though doctor feels like a generous word when you see his tools. Rusty needles, bronze scalpels, clay jars filled with dubious herbs and powders. He smells faintly of vinegar and sweat. With hands permanently stained from blood that no amount of scrubbing can erase, he doesn't smile. When he looks at you, he doesn't frown either. He just studies you like a cracked amphora that needs patching. For him, you're not a man, you're an investment that needs to be stitched together quickly, so you can get back into the yard. Compassion isn't part of the job description. That morning, a recruit collapses during drills, his ankle twisted grotesquely after a bad fall. Two guards drag him by the arms to the medicus, who barely glances up from grinding herbs in a mortar. With a grunt, he yanks the ankle straight. There's a crack like snapping wood, followed by the man's scream echoing through the hall. A quick wrap of linen, a dab of pungent salve, and the medicus waves him off as fit enough. You watch in horror. That would have ended any soldier's campaign. But here, it's just a sprain with a 2-day rest penalty. Historically, gladiators actually had better access to medical care than most Romans. Strange but true, because they were valuable property, Lannister wanted them patched up fast. Archaeological evidence shows that gladiator bones often healed surprisingly well. Proof of skilled if brutal treatment. Historians still argue whether this counts as good healthcare or just ruthless preservation of investments. Either way, when you see the medicus reaching for his needle, you're not thinking about history, you're praying you won't be his next patient. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes used spider webs as bandages. The threads supposedly helped clot wounds and keep them clean. Imagine getting mauled in practice, only for the doctor to slap a wad of cobweb on your arm and call it a day. Suddenly that barley porridge doesn't sound so bad. Your turn comes when a practice sword splits the skin above your eyebrow. Blood runs down into your eye, stinging like fire. The medicus doesn't ask permission, he grabs your chin, tilts your head, and jams a needle straight into the wound. No anesthetic, no comforting words, just a grunt as he ties a rough stitch. You gasp at the pain, your whole body trembling, but he ignores you. When he's done, he smears a thick layer of honey across the cut. Prevents rot, he mutters. And to be fair, Roman medicine did use honey as an antiseptic. Still, you can't help thinking he just ruined dessert forever. The next day, your eye is swollen, but you're back in the yard. There's no downtime, no sick leave, just the unspoken rule. If you can stand, you can fight. If you can't, well, there's always the mines. You learn quickly that injury isn't an escape, it's a delay. And the medicus is there to shorten the delay as much as possible. The worst part? You can't even hate him entirely. When you see a man walk again after a bone setting, or watch a fevered fighter recover after being force-fed bitter willow, Bart, the ancestor of aspirin, you realize the medicus actually knows his craft. He's skilled, resourceful, and efficient. He just doesn't care about your comfort. Historians still debate whether gladiators saw their doctors as allies or tormentors. In truth, he's both. He's the man who might save your life one day or make you wish you'd died quicker. As you lie on your bunk that night, stitches throbbing, you realize this in the arena. Wounds are inevitable, and so is the cold. Clinical touch of the medicus waiting to drag you back into misery again. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just measured in scars. It's measured in how fast those scars can be patched up for the next fight. If the medicus patches your body, the lonista reshapes your soul. He's the master of this place, the owner of your contract, and the reason you're alive only as long as you're profitable. You first see him up close in the training yard, broad-shouldered, draped in a toga that's too fine for a mere businessman, and surrounded by guards who hang on his every word. His gaze sweeps over the recruits like a butcher examining livestock. When his eyes meet yours, your stomach drops. You don't feel seen, you feel priced. The lonista doesn't shout like the trainers. He doesn't need to. His presence alone is enough to silence men mid-sentence. A crooked finger from him can mean lashes, solitary confinement, or worse. And when he does speak, his tone is cold and deliberate, as though every syllable is another nail pinning you deeper into your fate. Historically, Lannistae were some of the most despised men in Roman society. Even though they rubbed shoulders with senators and emperors, they were considered morally tainted. Tainted by the shame of running human blood sports. Romans saw them as necessary evils, profiteers who trafficked in flesh. Scholars still argue whether some Lannistae saw themselves as sports managers or slavers. From where you're standing, there's no debate. He owns you, body and soul. The rules he lays down are simple: obey, train, fight. Do not question orders. Do not refuse the arena. Do not attempt escape. He says these rules with a chilling calmness, as if they're not threats but facts of nature, like the sun rising or barley porridge tasting like dirt. You realize quickly that the lonista doesn't need to raise his voice, because the entire system is built to crush disobedience before it even forms. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Lannistae became celebrities in their own right, almost like coaches today. They were known for producing the best fighters, and audiences would chant their names in the arena. Imagine someone cheering not just for the gladiator, but for the guy who signed his paychecks. Ancient Rome had its own version of celebrity. Managers accept with more blood and fewer sponsorship deals. The Lonista isn't just a disciplinarian, he's a strategist. He studies each of you, deciding which roles will generate the most excitement. He pairs certain fighters as rivals, knowing that the crowd loves a good storyline. He even tweaks training schedules depending on who might be matched against whom. You're not just a slave, you're part of his living chessboard, and a crowd is watching. The cruelty of his control hits you hardest one evening when a fellow recruit collapses in the yard. The trainers drag the man before the Lonista. Everyone falls silent. The Lonista doesn't scold, doesn't rage, he simply studies the gasping man and gestures with 2 fingers. The guards haul him away. No one sees him again. Rumors ripple through the barracks. Some say he was sold to the mines. Others whisper he was executed as a warning. You realize the Lonista doesn't need to punish loudly. Disappearance works just as well. Historians still debate whether gladiators feared or respected their Lonista. In truth, it's both. He feeds you, houses you, and provides medical care, but only so he can throw you into the jaws of death. Without him, you wouldn't survive, but with him, you'll probably die sooner. It's a paradox only Rome could normalize. As night falls, you lie chained in your bunk, listening to the silence that follows his rare visits. The air always feels heavier after he leaves, like the weight of his authority lingers in the walls. You realize that in this prison school arena hybrid, the Lonista is more than a master. He's the god of your little world, deciding who rises, who falls, and who disappears. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't ruled by the sword or the whip alone. It's ruled by the cold, calculating will of the Lonista, whose every decision keeps you alive just long enough to sell tickets to your death. The Lonista decides you're ready to be trotted out, not for a real fight yet, but for what he calls public training exhibitions. To you, it feels like a cruel dress rehearsal. The gates of the Gladiators creak open, and for the first time you step into a small arena, nothing like the Colosseum, but still ringed with rows of benches filled with gawking Romans. They've come not to see death, but to watch you sweat and stumble, the warm-up act before the main course of blood. The sun blazes overhead. The sand glares white, and the roar of even a few hundred spectators pounds in your ears. You clutch your practice sword and shield, palms slick with sweat, wishing the ground would swallow you. A trainer barks an order, and you and another recruit shuffle into the ring. The crowd immediately starts jeering, shouting advice, insults, and wagers. You've never felt more like an animal in a zoo. Historically, gladiators often sparred publicly in training bouts, giving the citizens a preview of up-and-coming fighters. It was part of the marketing: build hype, sell tickets, and let the crowd fall in love with new stars. Scholars still argue whether these exhibitions were free to the public or charged at a discount. But either way, the effect was the same. The city got a taste of violence without anyone dying that day. The fight begins. Your opponent lunges clumsily, his wooden blade thudding against your shield. You stumble back, sand spraying your face. The crowd laughs, delighted by your awkwardness. You flush with humiliation, but a whip cracks from the sidelines, reminding you to get back into character. You swing, block, thrust, retreat, more dance than duel. But the crowd eats it up anyway. They cheer at every strike, boo at every pause, and shout for more when you collapse onto one knee. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gladiators became so popular during these exhibitions that children collected little clay figurines of them, like ancient Roman action figures. Imagine being beaten half to death in training only to find out later your likeness is being sold at a street stall. You wonder if anyone will ever carve your face into a toy, or if you'll just be another nameless body in the sand. The trainers push you harder, making you repeat sequences that look more dramatic. One veteran gladiator demonstrates, spinning with his trident so fluidly that the crowd gasps. The Lonista beams, he knows that spectacle sells. You're shoved back into the ring, forced to mimic moves your aching muscles can barely remember. Every mistake is met with laughter from the benches, every stumble with a chorus of boos. You're not just learning to fight, you're learning to perform humiliation. By the end of the exhibition, Your body is slick with sweat, your arms trembling from exhaustion. You've taken no real wounds, but somehow you feel more broken than after any training drill. The guards herd you and the others back through the gates, chains clinking, while the crowd disperses to grab wine and gossip about their favorite gladiator in the making. Historians still debate whether these mock fights helped or hindered morale. Did they give recruits practice in front of a crowd? Or did they crush spirits by showing how disposable each fighter was from where you stand? Gasping for air in the barracks afterward, it feels like both. You've learned that the crowd isn't just part of the background, they're the true masters of your fate. Without their cheers, you're nothing. Without their thirst for spectacle, you wouldn't even exist. As night falls and you lie chained. Once again, you can still hear echoes of laughter from the stands. It rings in your ears louder than the whip, harsher than the Lunista's commands. You realize that Rome doesn't just train you to fight, it trains you to be laughed at, cheered for, and discarded on a whim. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't confined to bloodshed, it's a performance, and you're already on stage. By now, you've realized that no amount of muscle or training guarantees survival. So the men around you begin whispering about omens, charms, and gods. The barracks are filled not only with sweat and the clink of chains, but with superstition. You watch one fighter carve tiny symbols into the handle of his sword, muttering under his breath. Another ties a strip of cloth around his wrist, swearing it was blessed by a priestess back home. In a world where your life could end with a single thrust, any scrap of luck feels worth clinging to. You start to notice these rituals everywhere. Before training, one man spits on the ground 3 times. Another refuses to step into the yard with his left foot first. Someone else scratches the figure of Fortuna, the goddess of luck, into the dirt with his toe. It looks ridiculous at first, grown men acting like children afraid of shadows, but then you realize, when death hovers this close, even a shadow can be terrifying. Historically, gladiators really did lean on superstitions. Archaeologists have uncovered amulets, carvings of Hercules, and graffiti invoking divine protection. Some even carried phallic charms, believing the symbol warded off evil. Yes, you heard that right. The ancient Romans thought a lucky doodle could keep you from bleeding out on the sand. Scholars still argue whether these charms were sincerely believed or simply part of the showmanship. But for the men holding them, the line between faith and performance was razor thin. One evening, you see a veteran carefully rubbing a paste of olive oil and herbs onto his arms. He tells you it makes his skin slippery, harder for an opponent to grab. Maybe it's true, maybe it's nonsense, but you can't help filing the trick away in your mind. Another man warns you never to look at a crow on fight day, it's a harbinger of death. Later, when you actually see one perched on the *Gladiator wall, you feel your stomach sink like a stone. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gladiators swore by a bizarre sunscreen made of crocodile dung, mixed with oils. Yes, you might one day smear reptile poop on your face and call it divine protection. When your life expectancy is measured in bouts, pride and perfume go out the window. Even the trainers acknowledge these superstitions in their own cruel way. Before mock bouts, one might sneer, "Pray to Mars, pray to Fortuna, it won't stop the blade." But it makes for a good laugh. And yet, you notice even they touch their amulets when lightning splits the sky or when the oil lamp sputters strangely during dinner. Fear makes believers of everyone. At night, lying in chains, you sometimes whisper a prayer to whatever god might be listening. Maybe Jupiter, maybe your own forgotten household spirit, maybe just to the stars themselves. You don't know if anyone hears. But the act itself feels like a shield, however thin. And when a fellow fighter presses a tiny carved figurine into your palm, a crude little Hercules, hacked from bone, you close your fingers tightly around it, feeling stronger for reasons you can't explain. Historians still debate whether these superstitions gave real courage or were merely distractions. But lying awake, clutching your amulet, you understand. When you're trapped in Rome's cruel machine, hope itself becomes a kind of weapon. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just fought with sword and shield, it's fought with whisper charms, foolish rituals, and the desperate belief that maybe, just maybe, The gods are watching. The day comes sooner than you expect. The Lannister's voice booms across the yard, and the guards single you out along with a few others. No more wooden swords, no more staged sparring before a half-drunk crowd. Today you step into the arena for real. Your stomach knots so tightly. You feel like you've swallowed a fist. Every step toward the gate feels like walking into your own grave. The sunlight blinds you as you emerge. The sand underfoot is glaring white, hotter than any practice yard you've known. The roar of the crowd slams into you like a wall. You've heard it faintly from inside the *LUDUS* before, but standing here it's deafening, a living thing that presses into your chest. Thousands of Romans lean forward, eyes fixed on you, ready to judge your every swing. You clutch your shield. Tighter, your sweaty palms sliding against the leather grip. Your opponent waits on the other side. He's another fresh recruit, though he looks far too eager for comfort. His armor glints in the sun, his helmet crest bobbing as he shifts nervously. The crowd doesn't care that neither of you has fought before. To them, it's all entertainment. Fear is part of the show. Historically, not every first fight ended in death. Some were deliberately lighter matches, meant to test rookies and give the crowd a taste. Still, plenty of men bled out on their very first outing. Scholars still argue whether Lannister rigged these bouts to keep valuable recruits alive, or if fresh meat was simply tossed in to see who sank or swam. For you, there's no comfort in the uncertainty. One mistake and you're gone training. Wasted, dreams ended in the dirt. The signal is given. Trumpets blare, the gate slams shut. And suddenly it's just you, your opponent, and the sand. He charges clumsily, swinging wide. Instinct takes over you. Raise your shield, feel the jolt, rattle your arm, and thrust forward with your short sword. The blade scrapes his armor, drawing a spark, but no blood. The crowd gasps anyway, delighted at the clang of steel. You circle, feet slipping in the loose sand. Your opponent lunges again, and this time you sidestep, driving your shield into his chest. He stumbles, falls to one knee. For a heartbeat, you stand above him, blade poised. The roar of the crowd crescendos. They want blood. You freeze, the weight of the moment crushing you. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Romans trained referees, called *Summa Rudis*, who stepped into moderate fights. Yes, even Bloodsport had referees with sticks to separate combatants if things went too far. One now strides between you, raising his hand. The bout isn't over, but the pause lets your opponent scramble to his feet. You realize you won't be allowed to simply finish him here. It has to be entertaining. The fight drags on, your arms growing heavier, shield bruising your shoulder, sweat stinging your eyes. Every thrust is clumsy, every block desperate. The crowd laughs when you slip, cheers when your opponent grazes your leg, and groans theatrically when you land a weak blow. It feels less like combat and more like being toyed with by a mob of thousands. Finally, the trumpet sounds again. The referee steps between you, declaring the fight a draw. Relief floods your body so fast you almost collapse. You're alive barely. You stagger back toward the gates, legs shaking, ears ringing with the crowd's mixed reaction. Some boo at the lack of blood. Others clap, amused at your fear. Either way, you've been weighed, measured, and, for now, spared. Historians still debate whether surviving a first fight built courage or deepened dread. As you stumble back into the dim corridors of the *Gladiators*, sweat cooling on your skin, you know the answer in your bones. The arena doesn't get easier. You'll be dragged back out again and again until the crowd decides it's had enough. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator has now truly begun with the heat of sand, the roar of Rome, and the realization that survival is just another part of the show. You think the hardest part of that first fight was the sweat, the sand, the aching arms, but no. The hardest part is discovering how much power the crowd has over you. The moment you step into the arena, your fate isn't decided by skill alone. It's decided by thousands of Romans packed shoulder to shoulder, sipping watered wine, gnawing olives, and shouting for blood like they're at the world's worst picnic. They cheer when you land a blow, they boo when you falter, and there, mood swings faster than a drunk senator at a dice game. One minute they're chanting your name or some nickname they've already slapped onto you without asking, and the next they're calling for your throat. You quickly learn that the real opponent isn't just the man across from you, it's the mob itself. Historically, Roman crowds held shocking influence in the arena. A defeated gladiator could beg for mercy, but it was the audience that pushed. The editor, the sponsor of the games, to decide with a thumb gesture. Scholars still argue about the exact meaning of thumbs up or down. Ancient sources are maddeningly vague. But one thing is clear: the crowd's roar swayed everything. They could save you or condemn you, all depending on whether they thought you'd given them a good enough show. The first time you see it happen, you're not even fighting. You're standing at the edge of the sand, waiting for your turn, when another man falls to his knees, shield broken, blood running down his arm. He raises his finger, the traditional plea for mercy. The crowd erupts in debate, half chant for his life, half scream for his death. The editor hesitates, scanning the stands, then finally gives the signal to kill. The arena explodes in joy as the victor drives his blade home. You feel bile rise in your throat. Here's a quirky tidbit. Roman poets recorded that sometimes crowds demanded a fighter be spared, not because he fought bravely, but because he looked attractive. Imagine your life depending on whether a group of strangers found you handsome. Suddenly, that scar on your eyebrow feels a lot less charming. Back in the barracks, men argue endlessly about how to win over the mob. Some say you must fight fearlessly, charging headlong into danger. Others insist style matters more: dramatic swings, theatrical falls, shouting challenges into the crowd. One veteran laughs bitterly. It doesn't matter. They'll cheer when you bleed and yawn when you don't. That's all the logic there is. You start to notice their fickleness everywhere. In training exhibitions, the same people who booed you last week might throw coins at your feet today. In the marketplace, you overhear citizens debating which gladiator is worth the ticket. They talk about you and your comrades like your horses at the races, not men with names and memories. Historians still debate whether gladiators themselves felt resentment toward the crowd, or a twisted form of gratitude. After all, the mob's approval could save your life, but lying on your bunk at night, chains biting your ankle, you know the truth. Their cheers feel hollow. They don't care who you are. They care only how well you bleed for their amusement. And so, every time you step into the arena, you remind yourself it's not just about striking the enemy. It's about playing to the stands. Make them gasp, make them laugh, make them lean forward in their seats. Because in Rome, the roar of the crowd is louder than your heartbeat, and it's the only sound that decides whether you walk out alive. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't ruled by steel alone, it's ruled by the fickle, thunderous voices of the Roman people, whose hunger for spectacle can keep you breathing one day and bury you in sand the next. You quickly learn that gladiators don't just bleed for applause, they bleed for coins. After each match, coins are tossed into the sand by delighted spectators. They clink and scatter like raindrops on stone, shimmering in the sunlight. For a brief, dizzying moment, you imagine scooping them up and buying your way out of this nightmare. Then reality slaps you harder than a trainer's whip. Those coins aren't yours. They belong to the lonista. Slaves don't get salaries. You fight, you bleed, you survive, and the money flows straight into your master's purse. Maybe, if he's feeling generous, he'll toss you a scrap. A few copper coins you can spend at the tiny market stall in the ***. But the piles of silver the crowd throws, forget it. That's his profit, not your reward. Historically, the economics of gladiators were brutal. Sponsors paid enormous sums to stage games, and lonista charged steep fees for their fighters. Victorious gladiators sometimes received gifts or a portion of the winnings, but most saw their efforts swallowed by the system. Scholars still argue whether star gladiators earned real wealth or whether even the famous ones were trapped in debt to their masters. What's certain is that for the average fighter, riches were a mirage. One evening after a match, you watch a fellow gladiator, an older Murmillo with scars across his chest, receive a purse of coins directly from the editor. The crowd roars as the victor lifts it high, But the moment he steps off the sand, the Lanister's men strip it from his hands. The Murmillo mutters under his breath, but he doesn't resist. Everyone knows better. The Lannister can reward or punish at will, and a missing coin pouch can mean lashes. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some emperors liked to hand out wooden tokens to spectators, which could later be exchanged for gifts. Imagine thousands of Romans leaving the Colosseum waving their freebies, bread, oil, even clothing, while you, the man who risked his neck for their fun, limped back to your cell with nothing but bruises. Ancient Rome basically invented the free merch game, and you weren't invited still. Every now and then, a coin or two does slip through the cracks. A guard might look the other way as you pocket a copper, or a friendly fan might slip a gift into your hand during the march back to the barracks. These small treasures become lifelines. A coin can buy you an extra crust of bread, a better blanket, maybe even a charm from a wandering peddler who swears it'll keep your throat uncut. It's not much, but it's something. The cruelest part is knowing the value of what you risk for so little. You hear whispers that senators wager entire estates on the outcome of a single fight. While you risk your life for a barley dinner, you can't decide whether to laugh or scream. Both sound equally futile. Historians still debate whether the prospect of prize money motivated gladiators, or whether the promise was dangled like a carrot in front of a starving mule. What you know is this: every time the crowd roars and coins rain down, it feels less like a reward and more like mockery. They can afford to throw silver away for fun, while you can't even buy your own freedom, and so you trudge back to the barracks empty-handed but not empty-headed. You've learned a bitter truth in Rome. Blood flows one way, money flows another, and the streams never meet. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just paid in wounds, it's paid in coins you'll never get to keep. The barracks may be iron and stone, but rumors slip through those cracks like smoke, and the ones that stick most stubbornly are about love, lust, and forbidden affairs. You hear whispers in the corner bunks, smirks exchanged after lights out, and even guards chuckling behind their hands. The story goes like this: Roman women, especially the wealthy ones, couldn't resist gladiators. Something about men who lived on the edge of death made them the ultimate bad boys of the ancient world. At first, you laugh it off. Who would swoon over a scarred slave? Who smells perpetually of sweat and barley mash? But then you notice things. The way noble women lean forward in their seats when fighters enter the arena. The roses and ribbons tossed down from the stands, sometimes with little wax-sealed notes attached. The glances that linger just a little too long as you're marched back to the asterisk Ladis asterisk. You begin to realize that the rumor isn't just rumor, it's Rome's guilty little truth. Historically, gladiators were sex symbols in Roman society, idolized despite or because of their lowly status. Graffiti has been found declaring, "Se Laudis." The fashion makes the girls sigh, proof that fangirling is at least 2,000 years old. Scholars still argue whether actual affairs with highborn women were common or exaggerated gossip, but enough ancient authors complained about it that something was clearly going on. One evening, a fellow fighter brags about receiving a scarf from a senator's wife. He claims she visited him in secret, slipping past guards for a forbidden embrace. You roll your eyes, assuming it's bluster, until a guard casually confirms the story with a grin. Suddenly, the rumor feels all too real. Another man mutters about being kept by a rich widow, smuggled into her villa for midnight trysts. In a world where you're shackled every night, the idea of stolen freedom in someone else's arms sounds intoxicating. Here's a quirky tidbit. Gladiator blood was sometimes believed to have aphrodisiac powers. Yes, women allegedly collected it in tiny vials to wear as charms or even drink, convinced it would make them more desirable. You don't know whether to be flattered or horrified. Probably both. The danger of these liaisons is obvious. If a Lannister finds out, punishment could be brutal both for you and for her. And yet, the allure is undeniable. You hear a veteran whisper that one of the surest ways to earn favor and protection is through the bed of someone powerful. A risky gamble, but then again, your whole life is one long gamble anyway. Historians still debate whether these affairs empowered gladiators or further chained them to Rome's twisted appetites. From your perspective, it feels like another form of exploitation, even in romance. You're someone else's thrill, another spectacle to consume. And yet, late at night, when the chains bite your ankle and the barracks stink of sweat, you can't help but imagine the soft hand of a noble woman brushing yours. A fleeting taste of a world you'll never truly belong to. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just fought in the sand. It's entangled in whispers of forbidden passion, where even love is another dangerous performance. Just when you think you've adjusted to the rhythm of fighting men, Rome decides to throw in a new horror: beasts. The first time you hear the roar, it freezes you mid-step. It isn't human, it's deeper, guttural, vibrating in your chest like thunder. Then you see them, cages lined against the edge of the arena, bars bending under the weight of lions, leopards, even a hulking bear that paces restlessly. The crowd goes wild at the sight. You, however, feel your knees go weak. The trainers don't prepare you much. They simply hand you a longer spear, slap a shield against your arm, and shove you forward. Fight or be eaten, one of them growls, as if that's motivation enough. You glance at the spear, thin and trembling in your hands, then back at the lion glaring at you through the bars. You can't decide which looks more likely to break first, you or the weapon. Historically, gladiatorial games often included animal hunts, known as *Venations*. These weren't always done by gladiators. Special hunters called *bestiary* trained for it, but sometimes unlucky recruits like you were thrown in as warm-up acts. Scholars still argue whether these beast fights were considered less prestigious, or simply a different flavor of entertainment, but the crowd never complained. Blood was blood, whether it belonged to man or beast. The gate creaks open and the lion lurches forward. Its mane ripples, its teeth glisten, and for a heartbeat you're certain this is the end. You thrust your spear forward on instinct, the tip shaking. The lion swerves, snarls, and the crowd gasps. The sound alone makes your blood run cold. The beast circles you, muscles rippling under golden fur, eyes fixed on your throat. Every nerve in your body screams to run, but there's nowhere to go. The arena is a cage, and you're the meat. Here's a quirky tidbit some Romans believed. Exotic animals were a sign of divine favor, brought to them as gifts from the gods. Emperors imported elephants, crocodiles, even giraffes, parading them before slaughtering them for sport. Imagine seeing a giraffe for the first time in your life, only for it to be speared in front of a cheering crowd. Rome loved turning wonder into bloodshed. Your fight drags on in a haze of terror. You jab, dodge, stumble, shield raised desperately as claws rake against the wood. Sand sprays into your eyes. Your heart pounds so hard you're sure the crowd can hear it. Finally, with one desperate thrust, your spear grazes the lion's flank. It roars in pain and fury, swiping wildly. The referee signals, and handlers rush in with nets and flaming torches to drive the beast back toward its cage. The crowd boos, disappointed you didn't provide a glorious kill. You collapse to your knees, chest heaving, sweat soaking through. Your tunic, alive but barely back in the barracks, the men mutter about their own animal bouts. One fought leopards that leapt so quickly he barely saw them coming. Another faced a bear so stubborn it took 6 men to finally subdue it. You realize with sinking dread that this won't be your last encounter. Rome has an endless supply of beasts shipped from every corner of the empire. Africa, Asia, even Britannia. The empire swallows the world and spits its animals onto the sand. Historians still debate whether these beast fights were truly gladiatorial contests or simply sadistic exhibitions. To you, there's no debate. You'll never forget the smell of that lion's breath, hot and rank against your face, or the sound of the crowd howling for blood louder than the beast itself. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just fighting men, it's being thrown to animals. Prey in a pit where survival feels less like skill and more like a cosmic joke. If beasts terrify you, the next layer of Rome's cruelty shakes you even deeper: executions. On certain days, the arena isn't just for staged fights. It's also the stage for what the Romans call noxi, the condemned, criminals, rebels, runaway slaves. Anyone unlucky enough to offend the empire can find themselves dragged into the sand not for combat, but for slaughter. And you, unlucky enough to train here, sometimes fight while their deaths provide background entertainment. The first time it happens, you're ushered into the arena, alongside other recruits for a sparring display. At the far end, a group of ragged men and women are herded in through another gate. Their eyes are hollow, their hands bound. Some stumble as guards shove them forward. The crowd cheers, not with anticipation of a duel, but with the glee of children waiting for a puppet show. You realize with horror, these people aren't here to fight. They're here to die. A trumpet sounds. Executioners step forward, sometimes gladiators pressed into double duty, sometimes soldiers dressed up for spectacle. The condemned are tied to posts or chained together, or, in the most grotesque twist, left unarmed in front of wild animals. Today, you watch a man pushed into the sand with only a stick, facing a leopard foaming with rage. The crowd roars with laughter as the cat tears him down. You grip your wooden sword tighter, stomach lurching. Historically, public executions were a staple of Roman games. They were scheduled at midday. Between morning beast hunts and afternoon gladiatorial bouts, the lunch break entertainment. Scholars still argue whether these displays were primarily deterrents to crime or simply sadistic spectacle, but either way, the message was clear. Rome has absolute power, and it delights in reminding everyone of it. Here's a quirky tidbit. Sometimes the condemned were forced to play roles in mythological reenactments. A man might be dressed as Icarus, then hurled from a high platform to his death, or as Orpheus, only to be mauled by animals. Imagine being executed as dinner. Theo to your death, scripted for laughs and applause. Rome truly had a flair for mixing cruelty with creativity. You stand in the sand, forced to spar while screams echo just a few yards away. Blood darkens the arena floor, mixing with the sweat dripping down your face. The crowd cheers for both, shows at once your clumsy strikes and their violent deaths blending into a single grotesque symphony. You fight because you must, but your mind keeps drifting toward the condemned, their cries lingering in your ears long after the trumpet signals the end. Back in the barracks, no one speaks of it openly. Some men scoff, pretending they're hardened. Others lie silently, staring at the ceiling. A Thracian beside you finally mutters, "At least we get weapons." They had nothing. You nod, feeling a strange mixture of shame and relief. You're trapped, yes, but compared to them, you're at least given the illusion of a chance. Historians still debate whether gladiators pitied the condemned, or saw them as a necessary reminder of their own fragility. But as you lie in chains that night, you know one thing: Rome doesn't waste an opportunity to entertain itself with human suffering. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just measured in your own battles, it's haunted by the screams of the condemned, whose death stained the sand beneath your feet long before your blood joins theirs. The barracks are never quiet, but some whispers cut sharper than the clang of chains. You begin to hear them at night, low voices speaking of Spartacus. The name alone carries a dangerous weight. Men huddle close, muttering how he once stood where you stand, branded, chained, forced to fight. But unlike you, he didn't stay. He broke free, and for a brief, blazing moment, he made Rome tremble. The stories ripple through the bunks. Some say he was a Thracian soldier who deserted and was enslaved. Others claim he had visions from the gods. What everyone agrees on is that in 73 BCE, Spartacus and a handful of gladiators seized kitchen knives and spit rods, overpowered their guards, and stormed out of their *LUDUS* at Capua. Soon, thousands of slaves joined him, swelling his ranks into an army. For 2 years, they carved their way across Italy, defeating legion after legion. The whispers always end the same way: if he could do it, maybe we could too. Historians still argue whether Spartacus truly sought to overthrow Rome or simply to escape it. Was he a revolutionary, a freedom fighter, or just a desperate man who refused to die in the sand. Whatever the truth, his rebellion remains the most infamous uprising in Roman history, and every time his name passes from bunk to bunk, you feel both a flicker of hope and a wave of dread. Because here's the thing, Rome remembers Spartacus too, and Rome never forgets. The trainers make a point of reminding you what happened in the end. Spartacus's army, after years of victories, was finally crushed by Marcus Crassus. 6,000 captured rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies lining the road for miles. A forest of corpses meant to terrify anyone thinking of following in his footsteps. You picture it, an endless gauntlet of broken bodies, swaying in the sun, birds picking at them while travelers hurry past. A warning carved into flesh. Still, the whispers don't stop. In fact, they grow louder after particularly brutal days. A Gaul across the room swears he has contacts in the city who could smuggle knives. A Greek claims he knows where the keys are kept. You listen, heart pounding, wondering if this is bravery or madness. Probably both. Here's a quirky tidbit. Roman writers grumbled that Spartacus's men once defeated a praetor by hurling flaming vines at his camp. Picture that, slaves turning farm tools into weapons and outsmarting professional soldiers. The story always gets a laugh in the barracks, but it also stirs something deeper. If peasants with torches could topple legions, maybe you're not as powerless as the chains make you feel. And yet, every time you let yourself imagine escape, you remember the crucifixions, the slow death, the public humiliation, the endless agony stretched out on a cross. Rome knows how to make examples of rebels, and the Lonista doesn't hesitate to remind you of it. He watches, he listens, and if he suspects treason, you'll disappear before you can whisper another word. Historians still debate whether later gladiators truly planned uprisings, or whether the memory of Spartacus was more legend than reality. But as you lie awake, staring into the dark, you know the thought is enough to keep hope alive and to keep fear burning just as hot. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't only about fighting in the sand, it's about living in the shadow of Spartacus, where rebellion whispers in your ear while crucifixion waits outside the gates. The barracks buzz whenever someone mentions the Rudius *, the wooden sword of freedom. It isn't a training tool this time, but a symbol. If you fight long enough, if you survive enough bouts, and if the crowd loves you enough, the editor or even the emperor himself might grant you this prize. The Rudius * means release, not just from the chains of the Gladius *, but from slavery itself. You'd walk away a free man, scarred but alive, carrying a piece of polished wood that declares you've beaten Rome at its own bloody game. The veterans talk about it the way children talk about fairy tales. I saw it once, one Murmillo says, staring into the distance. A man for 20 matches, won 18, survived the rest. On his last bout, the editor stood, raised his hand, and gave him the wooden sword. The crowd went mad. He walked out of the gates that day a free man. The barracks fall silent. Everyone pictures it, each man imagining the feel of polished wood in his own hands. Historically, gladiators did sometimes win freedom. The Rudius * was rare, but not unheard of. Emperors like Caligula and Nero were known to grant it to their favorites, sometimes more as a show of generosity than as recognition of true skill. Scholars still argue whether freed gladiators lived better lives afterwards and became trainers. Others bodyguards, a few even wealthy, but many, addicted to fame or with no other trade, kept fighting voluntarily. That irony isn't lost on you. Even freedom could chain you back to the arena. The cruel truth. Most never even got close. A single unlucky blow, a single bad crowd, and a dream ended in the sand. Yet men clung to the possibility. Hope, after all, is the only luxury not rationed in the *LUDUS*. Here single quotes as a quirky tidbit. Some freed gladiators reportedly carried their wooden swords everywhere, even to dinner parties, showing them off like status symbols. Imagine a man lounging at a banquet, sipping wine, casually laying a wooden blade on the couch beside him, his personal proof that he'd once stared death in the eye and walked away. In a strange twist, these men became celebrities, their scars, admired like medals. But in the barracks, hope and envy mix into a bitter brew. Some mutter that the **Grudius* is a lie, a carrot dangled to keep you running. Others swear they'll live long enough to earn it. A few say they wouldn't even want freedom. What would they do outside these walls? After years of chains and combat, they only know how to fight. You wonder which camp you'll fall into at night. Chained to your bunk, you let yourself imagine it anyway. You see yourself standing in the arena, battered but alive, the editor raising his hand, the crowd chanting your name. A guard steps forward, places the polished wooden sword in your hand. For once, it's not a symbol of training but of release. You walk out the gate, no chains on your ankle, no whip at your back. Historians still debate whether the **Grudius* was truly a path to freedom, or more often just a story whispered to keep men obedient. But as you drift into uneasy sleep, you know this much, even if it's a lie. It's the kind of lie that keeps you breathing through another day of drills, lashes, and blood. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator is lit by one impossible dream that, someday, maybe, a wooden sword will mean you finally get to stop swinging the real one. If the crowd's roar is deafening, the silence that follows when the emperor himself enters the arena is even heavier. One moment the stands buzz with gossip, dice games, and drunken laughter, the next, all eyes turn to the imperial box, draped in purple, crowned with laurels. He doesn't just watch, he judges, and you feel it instantly. Your fate has shrunk. To the whim of a single raised or lowered hand, you step onto the sand, knees weak, shield heavy. Across from you, another fighter salutes, his voice cracking as he shouts, **Gave, Caesar. Morituri salutendi **. Hail, Caesar, we who are about to die salute you. The words scrape your throat as you echo them, because what else can you do in this moment? You're not just a gladiator, you're a prop in the emperor's theater. Proof of his power. Historically, the emperor often held the final say in gladiatorial games. The **editor** of the match, whether a senator or Caesar, himself decided whether a defeated fighter lived or died. Scholars still argue about the exact thumb gestures, whether thumbs up meant mercy or death. But everyone agrees the emperor's decision was absolute. One gesture could erase years of training. Bonds and survival. The fight begins. You trade blows with your opponent, each strike echoing in the tense air. But you're distracted not by him, but by the figure watching from above. The emperor leans forward, chin on his fist, bored and calculating. You realize with icy dread that it doesn't matter how well you fight. What matters is how much your struggle entertains him. Your opponent stumbles, shield slipping, and the crowd roars for blood. He raises his finger, the plea for mercy. All eyes shift upward to the imperial box. The emperor doesn't rush. He enjoys the suspense, letting the mob chant and shout. Then, with the smallest flick of his hand, he seals the man's fate. A roar explodes as the victor drives steel into flesh. You stand frozen, breath caught in your throat, knowing that next time it could just as easily be you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some emperors had bizarre habits when judging fights. Commodus, who fancied himself a gladiator, once spared opponents, just so he could kill them personally later. Others, like Augustus, were known for surprising mercy, granting freedom to fighters who impressed them. Imagine training for years, only to be undone or saved by the mood of a man with indigestion that morning. Back in the barracks, the men talk of emperors like gamblers talk of dice. Caligula loves blood, one mutters. Nero craves spectacle. Marcus Aurelius, he's a philosopher, maybe he'll let you live if you fight with dignity. Every rumor becomes a survival guide, though you know none of it matters. At the end of the day, you're a pawn in Rome's entertainment, and emperors love their pawns broken. Historians still debate whether gladiators truly hated the emperors or secretly adored them as patrons. To you, it feels simple. Your life is nothing more than a coin flipped by a hand draped in purple. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't only a struggle against men and beasts, it's a gamble played under the emperor's gaze, where a single lazy thumb decides whether you walk back to chains or never walk again. You think the humiliation ends when the fight does, but Rome has other ways to remind you you're just merchandise. One morning, as you're marched back from the arena, you spot something at a market stall that makes your stomach twist. A cheap, oil lampet's clay surface molded with the figure of a gladiator raising his sword. The details are crude, but you recognize the armor, even the helmet crest. It's not just any gladiator. It's supposed to be you. The vendor shouts proudly. Lamps of our brave fighters bring the arena home. A cluster of Romans gather, tossing coins, buying the lamps as souvenirs. Children giggle as they hold them up, pretending to fight. You feel heat rising in your face. You're bleeding for survival, and out here you're nothing but a knick-knack sold for a few coppers. Historically, gladiators became part of Roman pop culture. Their likenesses appeared on lamps, cups, figurines, even graffiti. Fans scrolled names and victories on walls, turning fighters into minor celebrities. Scholars still argue whether gladiators themselves ever profited from this merchandise. But the evidence points to no, it was the vendors and Lannister who made money. You just got to be the brand logo. The irony is brutal. Some of your companions laugh bitterly when they hear of these trinkets. At least you'll outlive yourself, one mutters. Another shrugs. Better to be a lamp than forgotten. But you can't shake the sickening thought. The crowd lights their homes with your face, while you shiver in chains, sleeping on a wooden bunk. Here's a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists once found graffiti declaring, "Crescens the net fighter is the delight of all the girls." Imagine stumbling on that in the barracks, your comrade immortalized in bathroom scroll. His fame reduced to a one-liner. It's absurd, but it proves the Romans loved branding their gladiators like sports stars. Long before jerseys and trading cards, the Lannister, of course, encourages it. He knows the more famous his fighters become, the more the crowd will pay to see them. He even assigns nicknames: asterisk the Thracian tiger, asterisk the Gaul crusher, asterisk names designed to sell. You try to hold on to your real name, but it slips away with each chant of your new label. Rome doesn't care who you were, it cares what role you play in its endless circus. Back in the Ludus asterisk, some men cling to this warped celebrity. They preen. When fans shout their names, polish their helmets obsessively, practice dramatic poses in the mirror of their shield. Others reject it, spitting whenever they hear their names barked by strangers. You fall somewhere in between, flattered that people know you, furious that you're nothing more than a caricature. Historians still debate whether this fame gave gladiators a sense of empowerment or deepened their dehumanization. From where you sit, staring at the scar on your branded shoulder, you know the answer. You're not famous, you're franchised, and every trinket, lamp, or graffitied slogan is another reminder that Rome doesn't just own your body, it owns your image. 2. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just shackled in chains, it's sold at the marketplace. Your face burned into clay while your blood seeps into sand. The years grind on, and your body tells the story more clearly than words ever could. Every scar, every limp, every deep ache is a reminder that you're not just surviving, you're slowly breaking down. When you first arrived at the Ludus asterisk, you could swing a wooden sword until your arms burned and still rise again the next morning. Now, every dawn feels like dragging stone weights out of your bones. Your shoulder, branded years ago, still throbs whenever the weather shifts. Old cuts tug at your skin like stitched seams threatening to split. Your knees creak from constant lunging on hard sand, and your hands calloused, blistered, and swollen barely remember what it's like not to clutch steel. You notice the younger recruits staring at you with a mixture of respect and pity. To them, you're living proof of what they'll become if they survive long enough. Historically, gladiator bones recovered by archaeologists reveal staggering, damaged, fractured skulls, shattered ribs, and joints worn down decades before their time. Many gladiators who lived past a handful of years were permanently crippled. Scholars still argue whether the Lannister provided enough care to keep veterans functional, or simply used them until they collapsed. Either way, the evidence is written in bones, The arena chewed men up like grindstones. The worst pain isn't the obvious wounds. It's the quiet decay. You wake with headaches that throb behind your eyes. Your breathing rattles after training, chest aching from old bruised ribs. Food doesn't sit right anymore. The barley mash that once filled you with strength now feels like clay dragging through your stomach. You watch younger men scarf it down and remember when you could do the same. Now, every bite feels like fuel you'll never fully burn. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gladiators actually doubled as public strongmen when they aged, paraded at festivals like walking relics. Romans gawked at their scars, treating them as living curiosities. Imagine staggering out, half crippled, just so children could point and laugh at the old fighter too broken to entertain in the sand. Retirement, Roman style. And yet, you keep fighting. The lonista doesn't care about your pain. He cares about whether you can still stand long enough to sell a ticket. You're patched up by the *medicus*, stitched, splintered, and shoved back into the yard. Each scar becomes another ledger mark in Rome's balance sheet. The crowd might cheer your bravery, but you know the truth. It isn't courage, it's attrition. Historians still debate whether gladiators feared the decline more than death. From your perspective, decline is its own kind of execution. You can endure the pain of a single wound, but living with a body crumbling piece by piece feels like drowning in slow motion. At night, you trace the scars across your arms like a map of battles you never chose. You wonder how much more your body can endure. You wonder if you'll be remembered at all, or if, when the final blow comes, your broken corpse will be swept from the sand like so much trash. The crowd already cheering for the next match. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't just about the fights, it's about the slow decay. The body that betrays you long before the sword does. You always imagined your end would be sudden, a blade slipping past your shield, a lion's claw catching your throat, a crowd roaring as your body dropped into the sand. But as the years drag on, you realize death doesn't always come in a single stroke. Sometimes it arrives slowly, disguised as exhaustion, despair, or the quiet crumbling of your will. The final fight could happen any day. You're led into the arena once more, armor strapped hastily, shield heavier than ever. Across from you, another fighter stands just as weary, just as battered. Both of you pawns pushed forward for one more round. The sun blazes, the sand burns, and the roar of the crowd presses against your skull. You lift your sword, but your arm trembles before the fight even begins. The clash comes anyway. Steel on steel, sand flying, sweat stinging your eyes. You stumble, regain balance, strike wildly. The crowd cheers not for you, but for the spectacle of two broken men giving their last ounces of strength. You feel the cuts, the bruises, but deeper still you feel the weight of inevitability. This is what you were bought for. This is where your story ends. Historically, some gladiators did fight until the very end, collapsing in sand darkened with their own blood. Others simply faded away in the barracks, too injured or sick to ever return to the arena. Scholars still argue which fate was better, to die before the crowd or to rot slowly in chains. You know neither is enviable. Your opponent falters, falling to one knee. The crowd leans forward, chanting, demanding the signal. He raises his finger, begging for mercy. You stand, chest heaving, waiting for the editor's gesture. The hand twitches, a thumb lifts, wavers, then lowers. The man's head bows in acceptance. You know the script. You drive your blade forward and the crowd erupts. You feel no triumph, only emptiness. Later that night, you sit chained in the barracks, staring at your hands. They shake, not from fatigue, but from the hollow truth settling into your bones. Whether in the arena or in the shadows of your cell, your ending will be the same. Rome will grind you down, wring every drop of blood and sweat, and then move on without a second thought. The crowd will cheer for the next fight, the next body, the next tragedy. Your name, your scars, your entire life forgotten as easily as yesterday's games. Here's a quirky tidbit to make the bitterness worse. Some gladiators' helmets and weapons were reused for years, passed to new recruits after their owners died. Imagine that the gear you sweat into might outlive you. carried by another poor soul while your body rots in an unmarked grave. You aren't a legacy. You're recycling. Historians still debate whether gladiators found meaning in their profession or whether it was nothing more than survival wrapped in spectacle. As you sit with chains around your ankle, you know the truth. There's no meaning, only endurance. And endurance always ends. Your horrible life as a Roman gladiator isn't destined for statues or songs. It's destined for silence weather. In sand or in shadows, your final act will vanish into Rome's endless appetite for more blood. More cheers, more death. But now, let the sand fade from your vision. Let the roar of the crowd soften until it's no louder than the hum of a distant breeze. You don't need to grip the sword anymore or feel the chains biting into your ankle. The arena is slipping away, brick by brick, as the gates close not. With dread but with peace, breathe slowly in, out. The heat of the Roman sun cools, replaced by the gentle hush of twilight. Your scars, your bruises, the ache in your bones, all of it drifts like smoke on the night air. The weight of the shield slides from your arm, the sting of the brand fades from your skin. You're no longer a captive, no longer a fighter, no longer an echo for a crowd's amusement. You are just a soul resting. Imagine the chains falling open with a quiet click. They tumble to the floor and dissolve into mist. You step forward, barefoot on soft earth, not on scorching sand. The air is filled not with shouts, but with crickets and the rustle of leaves. The stars overhead glimmer, calm and steady, indifferent to Rome and its cruelty. They remind you that beyond empires and arenas, there is always something greater, something eternal. Let your breath lengthen. Let your eyelids grow heavy. The torches of the Colosseum dim into fireflies, flickering gently in the distance. The crowd dissolves into silence, their noise replaced by the soothing rhythm of your own heartbeat. You are safe now, far from the whip, far from the sword. Rest, drift, sleep. Your battles are over, and the night is yours.